Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Council represented and fellow panel members, members of the public. This is the Police and Crime Panel meeting on Tuesday the 7th of July. It's just past 6:30 p.m. And this meeting has one significant, well, it's got a number of agenda items. The most significant item we're going to talk about today is the annual report. And I'll just remind members that whilst we've got a wide remit to review and scrutinise decisions being made, it's our responsibility to consider the annual report and make recommendations to which the PCC needs to respond to. But we'll get to that at a later stage. In the meantime, my name's Paul Downing. I'm the Vice Chair. The Chair today, the Chair is today, Gareth Mackay. He's in Bournemouth at Local Government Association meeting, which is absolutely fine. Other than that, have we got any questions? I've been sent none. I can see no hands raised. That's great. Apologies for absence, of which there must be several.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies, as you mentioned, Councillor Mackey, Councillor Frost, Councillor Lovell, Nawaz, Vesalian and Pashby.
Thank you. So we've got no representation here from Bedford Borough and no representation from Central Beds at this moment in time, which is disappointing, especially as this is one of our sort of statutory duties, but there we are. Moving on, minutes of the last meeting, which was the 2nd of June, it was an administrative meeting. I think there's only 3 of us that were present for that meeting, Lee and Steve. You had a chance to read it, consider it? Yeah, approved them. Thank you very much indeed. And moving on to disclosure of local and or disclosable pecuniary interests. Fiona?
Yeah, just to confirm, I'm now Chair of Trustees at Link to Change, and we are in receipt of money from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and we are highlighted as a case study in the annual report. Thank you.
And ditto, I'll register an interest as a Director of U-Turn Futures, which are also named within the annual report. Thank you very much indeed. No one else? Thank you. Commissioner, moving on at pace. We're not going to get through a hydration break at this stage, but your report, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'll talk to you my report, which I take it has been read, so I don't intend to go through every page. That may take us not only beyond the hydration break, but behind the end of play, even with extra time or storms that may delay play. I'll stop any more World Cup analogies. The items I wanted to draw attention to, the appeal inspection by His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Service has been completed, and we will receive the final report probably in the early autumn. No guarantee on date at the moment. Not clearly in a position to say how it's gone or not gone. We've had a verbal debrief, but experience tells you the verbal debrief and the written report can be at variance. So, and we also have a confidential agreement with them, and we wouldn't want to upset the inspectorate at this stage. But in terms of the actual administration, I think it went well, and I think it puts us in a very good position. I've referred in my report to the National Police Reform, and we could spend all evening both talking about it and speculating as to what will ultimately be in the Police Reform Bill, which is due to be published after the summer recess. I think inevitably there will be change, and I've mentioned this previously. I think the government will proceed with establishing the National Policing Service, bringing together counter-terrorism, National Crime Agency and a number of other national capabilities. But precisely what form that will take, yet to be determined. There's the abolition of police and crime commissioners, which for Bedfordshire, as things stand at the moment, will mean that we will have a local policing board with representatives of the 3 local authorities and I think some independent members. Again, the detail of that yet to be announced, and besides size. It is clearly a neater change where there is a directly elected mayor for an area which is coterminous with 1 or more police services. At the moment, and local government colleagues here will know better than I, my understanding is there are no proposals for a mayor for Bedfordshire, and even for Milton Keynes and Bedfordshire, it's likely to be a foundational authority that won't have an elected mayor, and even if it did, Milton Keynes is in Thames Valley. So I think we will certainly have a local policing body established by, in time to take over from me and my office in May of 2028. We have the new performance framework, and we will hear next week at what level Bedfordshire Police has been allocated by His Majesty's Chief Inspector following a very rigorous process. And there's level 1 means you are, that's a force that doesn't require support. Level 2 is a force that requires some external support. Level 3 is equivalent to the previous engaged in special measures. Level 4 will be a candidate for Secretary of State intervention. But interestingly, until the bill becomes an act, the Secretary of State doesn't have the power to intervene. So I don't think there'll be any level 4s. But we will know that, I think it's going to be published next Thursday or Friday of next week. And clearly, we don't know.
Just on that, John.
Yes.
John, so has the Peel report been written with those guidelines in mind, or will the guidelines come in subsequent to the Peel report?
The levelling process takes into account the Peel report, the latest analysis and data from the Inspectorate, Home Office data, which is actually not insubstantial. I know this because I sit on the police performance monitoring group that was advising the Inspector on the levels. But again, clearly that was I can't disclose the outcome of that meeting tonight. And also takes into account things like local context as well. I think it's actually a rigorous process. And clearly the Inspectorate would have been influenced by what they have seen during the Peel process, but they won't have written their report at that stage. And as I say, I could talk further about reform, more than happy to take questions. I think, as we have said previously, probably in the autumn, when we have the bill, that may be an opportunity for a workshop or some other.
Let's see what the new Prime Minister wants.
Well, I suspect there will be no change in this area, though I suspect Greater Manchester Police may remain a police force without any changes to its boundaries. And I think it's less, if there were to be a change of Home Secretary, and we don't know, that might make a difference. I think a change of Prime Minister is very unlikely to do so. The other, I've referred to my national roles, I'm more than happy to talk about those, and I think that I won't, but they bring benefit to Bedfordshire. I completed my 360-degree appraisal, and anyone here who contributed to that, thank you for that. I think the 2 areas just to highlight, or three areas I want to highlight. One is the partnership working, which continues to grow and develop. And as you know, we undertook a review of strategic governance across the agencies, and we are the proposal is to substitute the Serious Harm Board with a strategic, yet to be named, Community Safety or Crime Board, which would be chief executive and leader level for local authorities and equivalent for other public
Is that
agencies.
all three authorities?
All three authorities, yes. But that, hopefully that will come to fruition in the new year. I've reported previously our grassroots innovation fund. We had the first tranche of the 25-26 fund, which is £100,000 out of the community safety fund, which is the grant fund that's in my discretion and control. We had a very successful focus on prevention, and we got a significant 57 applications. I'm told by my team, so I didn't look at the applications, because I did not get involved in that kind of decision making and allocation. They were of high quality, and some 21 have been awarded. I think I'm not going to talk to it, but I've made reference in my paper to community cohesion and the growth of hate crime and racism, which is clearly increasing in the county. There is anxiety in some communities. Hate crime reporting is up. I'm pleased to say I've introduced and paid for an independent third-party reporting for hate crime. I think Bedfordshire had it once and then lost it. I think that's a real positive. Many other parts of the country have it. There's many people, you know, those people who are suspicious, nervous of reporting to the police to report through that charity in many ways. So I think that's going to work very well. And the only other area really to refer to in here, in terms of my report, I think is the work we're doing jointly with the CPS and the courts through the Criminal Justice Board to enhance the way in which victim personal statements are used. The police have a duty to take a victim personal statement from a victim, but all too often they're not then deployed in the court. And there is a commitment from the Crown Court, Magistrates Courts, and the CPS to ensure those statements are, and we've got a pilot.
So boxes have been ticked in creating the statement.
Well, no, the statement, it's more than that. The statement can be very, very thorough, very comprehensive.
I get that.
But they're not always used by prosecution counsel.
Okay.
Or by prosecutor. It tends to be the case. The statements there are not necessarily used. And victims, you know, have an entitlement to have those statements written and read out. And I think often, and again, it's anecdotal, they may be used when the prosecuting solicitor or barrister feels it will aid their case rather than aid the voice of the victim. So, and Bedfordshire is probably not out of tune with what's happening in other parts of the country, and that will form part of our wider review of victims' services and support. And again, hopefully by the next meeting of this panel, I'll be able to report on the outcome of that review. So, by way of introduction, Chair, that's my report. More than happy to take questions in what's in the report, or those things which you may have thought ought to be in the report, but were not in the report.
John, and I guess that last point you make about the victim statement is something you can pick up through your role as the lead for criminal justice. Because I'm actually shocked that they're not being used.
This pilot has come through the Criminal Justice Board. So the Criminal Justice Board is owning this pilot scheme, has the judiciary assigned up to it, magistrates, the court service and CPS, as well as the police.
One of the things and I'll come to other members shortly, but you know that I do love to review the two key meetings that you have during the course of the last couple of months, and they are the PCC and Chief Constable Accountability meetings, and also your Performance Governance Board meetings. Thank you for sharing them. I do hope that members have clicked on the links and gone over them, because we can therefore see one of our key functions to see how you're holding the Chief Constable to account. And I've said in the past that I felt there was tension sometimes in the minutes, but it's just black and white words, aren't they? I'm looking here at where shall I go to? Let's go to the 18th of May, and you had a conversation with the Chief Constable, more than a conversation, I feel sure. what came out of that? The solved rate is improved, and I know some of this is covered in your annual report, and he's aspiring to solve 20% of crime. I note that. I'm reading this out purely so that anyone who's looking for a record of how you're operating with the Chief Constable gets to understand what's going on. The 20%, I think that's a realistic target to aim for in my personal experience, and looking at how other forces are performing too. It's not going to happen overnight, I get that, but I see that you are asking for improvements over the next 6 months. You've asked for your local policing strategy. This seems to have been a theme for a while now, the local policing strategy, and a prevention strategy too to be developed. And you make reference there to the new performance dashboard. So there's lots in there on the 18th of May where you were talking to the Chief Constable and asking difficult questions around performance. Later in June, 15th of June, you have a conversation, and that relates to the... You might want to just expand on this. That'd be helpful for members to understand the Chief's Vision event. I think I sat through several of those in my time in the Metropolitan Police. Every chief has their own version, but yes, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the Chief's Vision event, especially how that impacts on prevent, respond and solve. You talk about, I've put a question mark here because in the minutes it talks about a pan-Bedfordshire governance report by, and I'm sure I should know the answer to this, CFGS. Now I came up with a Golf Society, but I'm sure it's not.
The Centre for Governance and Scrutiny.
Obliged, thank you. And I presume that's the strategic picture all over the country.
Chair, that's what I refer to in terms of the changes to the serious harm.
Exactly. Great. And you're having this ongoing conversation about police reform, and that will come, as you say, at the end of the summer. We'll all be a little bit wiser. I then turn to the 28th of May, and you held the Performance and Governance Board. Lots in here. Response rates, the time to respond, showing us 57.9%, let's call it 60% amongst friends. So just off a target of 60%, but the national target is 90%. You are making those challenges, I see that, and I see that the force is looking at how local police officers can respond to emergency incidents or emergency calls. Within here, again, there's a request for... Oh, yeah, there was a discussion about neighbourhood policing, and haven't we spoken a lot about neighbourhood policing over the years, and numbers. Let's not worry about the numbers here tonight, but talk of abstractions, and I know Phil's here and was commenting on that back at that meeting, and abstractions from neighbourhood policing teams. There's always going to be abstractions. We live in the real world. Again, you're asking for the local policing strategy. You might want to talk to us about that. Officer headcount now was 1486. I'm sure it's changed in the last 72 hours or whatever, 1486. Phil, you might be able to help us out there. When we argued back about policing numbers, you had to hit a total. Is it still the total? Come back to me on that one, 1486, because I'm reading here the attrition rate has increased. And am I reading there then that we've lost a few in the last couple of months, a few officers in the last couple of months? There's then a reference to the new leaders programme. Now I'm going to take us off on a slight tangent on that. I presume the new leaders programme is a Bedfordshire initiative, but I'll come back to that in a sec. Hold that thought, because you then talk about the estate strategy and wanting that being brought forward, and I'm sure we'd all be interested to see that. On leadership, there was a report published on Monday, so it's hot off the press, certainly hot off my printer. I guess you've had a chance, through your national roles, you'll have been aware the work was ongoing. I imagine that the Chief Constable was aware of this work that was ongoing. Members, it relates to, I sent out a link earlier on this morning. I don't blame any of you for not having looked at the 24 recommendations that are arising. you'll all have worked in offices where things changed over a period of time, and 15 years later you start doing the same thing again. There used to be a thing called Bramshill Leadership College, a beautiful mansion down in Surrey. I was lucky enough to attend it on several occasions. It was the Police Leadership Academy, and there's a report come out on Monday looking at police leadership at all levels, not just chief constable levels, all the way down to sergeants, indeed constables, senior constables. And I just wonder how you see, and this is probably just after dinner conversation, John, between you and me now, how you feel this leadership report, do you recognise some of the weaknesses that have been highlighted within Bedfordshire, or do you, on the contrary, do you see it as being Bedfordshire as being an outlier and actually not having half the problems that the report tries to fix? There's a lot there, I know.
A lot there, right? Come back if I've missed any of the points. I tried to make them all down. The solve rate has gone up overall, and that's good news. It clearly varies between different crime types. I think the aspiration for 20% is welcome, and I hope we get there sooner rather than later. But I want us to get there in a sustainable way and in a way that actually solves the crimes that need to be solved. It will be very easy to pick, I don't want to be too cynical, but you could, some forces that have a high solve rate published may well be solving relatively easy solved issues, like single use of cannabis or so on. So I think that has to be sustained, and I want to see it sustained across the piece, particularly in those crimes where there is a victim, and a victim who may be personally damaged, such as in domestic abuse and violence, Raslo space, but other areas too where there's a direct victim. The prevention strategy is there now. In fact, we had a conversation at the P&G last week. Minutes won't be yet published on prevention based on that strategy. The local policing strategy has been some time in gestation, and part of that is because it is actually a moving world with government policy on national policing guarantee and other requirements. Also, we want to have a policy that is forward-looking, that takes into account the very significant changes that are going to occur in Bedfordshire over the next few years. We are the fastest growing county in the east of England currently, but Universal, Thamesford, expansion of the airport and other developments need to be taken into that, and also the model of policing. And part of the review that Lord Hogan Howe is conducting on mergers is also looking at what should be an enhanced local policing unit. So if you have bigger forces, you have an enhanced local unit, and that needs to be factored into a local strategy, and it has to be properly resourced. It then needs to be a state strategy, because is the existing estate aligned with what you're trying to achieve? Strategically, do we need to move to that too? So I think that is something that will come over the next, hopefully the next few months. The response rates are not where, the response rate, answer to the telephone for 999 is where it needs to be. Clearly it could be better, but it's hitting the national target and beyond. It's the time of from the call to the officer arriving. That is not, that is improving, and there have been a significant increase in response times in the last 6 months. I think I'm right in saying as I feel. And each month it's getting better. So that is good progress. That also links into a local policing strategy, so it's where it's linked. But again, and some of the innovations that have taken place in the control room, I'm going to get myself into operational areas here, by using better technology to assist making the triage decision, making sure officers are better informed of what they're going to, getting better mobile facilities in cars, etc. is all part of that process. But again, I know we have national targets and the government are going to impose national targets for response. I'm of the view it's not simply the time that you get there, it's the quality of what happens when you get there, the way you treat the victim, you do all the work that needs to be done. So response time is really important, as it is in ambulance or fire, but it's not the only thing that you need to take it. You need a quality, not just a time response to. You asked about the Chief's vision event. This is when the Chief brings together all the officers and staff, so that's all 1,480 plus about 1,000 plus staff, over a number of half days, happened to be held at Cranfield University this year, where he and the Chief Officer team talk about their vision, and as you say, prevent, solve and respond is the sort of vision for the coming year or so. I went to one of them. I think they are well attended, well respected, and quite participatory, and I think officers and staff feel they have the ability to challenge and ask questions at those. So I think they're a good thing. You know, you were talking about when you at the Met, trying to do that for 40,000 will be quite a challenge. And of course it is time consuming. I think it's an investment well made, both by the Chief but also by officer time as well. You talked about neighbourhood policing. We are meeting the requirements of the Neighbourhood Police Guarantee, which just requires us to minimise distractions. But you're absolutely right. You know, at the moment, demand is higher than it's ever been. We've gone well over 600 incidents each day for consecutive weekends. Now, you've got to have officers to deal with that. They can't always be the officers. That may require obstruction from time to time. But there is a commitment to minimise that. And sometimes we talk about obstruction, but an officer will be doing something in his or her community, neighbourhood, but may not be walking the streets in the way they might be doing it normally, but actually they're serving that community. So I think that's important too. The leadership programme referred to was a local one. The Lord Blunkett and Lord Herbert's report was published yesterday. You've managed to read it, 150 pages. I haven't. I've read the executive summary, and I've also had a presentation by Lord Blunkett on it. I think there's much in there to commend. I think some of it probably is what is happening already in Bedfordshire and elsewhere. There is the big question about resourcing. I think it's right we need to invest in leadership at all levels, because everyone is a leader in policing, and the supervisory level of leadership is really vital, at sergeant and inspector level. And we are we are doing a lot of work on that in Bedfordshire. That comes through then the leadership at the the Chief Constable level. Yes, Bramshill could return or its equivalent. But the Home Office may have to find some money for that. But I think the principle of leadership, and what I've found in my national role, and I talked about the police performance monitoring group, those forces which are doing less well, it's normally the first problem is leadership. If you haven't got the right leader at the top and the right top senior leadership team, you're not going to make success. But good leaders actually ensure everyone's empowered to be leaders, and you have good supervisory leaders too. And I think the only other thing I noted here, Chair, but I may have missed something, was the estate strategy. That will come, but that is very much dependent on things like the local police strategy.
I mean, the point that I was making there, that members, is that there is evidence, and there always has been evidence for many months now, in fact throughout your period in office, of challenge and appropriate support for your interaction with the Chief Constable. So thank you for that. Phil, can you just help us out with those numbers?
Yeah, so whilst we don't have a target anymore, the establishment for police officers is still 1486. And you are right that our attrition was slightly higher last year than it was a year before. But the previous year, 18% of our attrition related to retirements, whether that be normal retirements or ill health. Last year, that was closer to 30%. So we've lost less people through resignation last year than we did in the previous year. So whilst it's a higher attrition rate, it's a better news story.
Members, any questions on the Commissioner's report?
Thank you. Commissioner, I'm pleased to hear that you mentioned work on tackling hate crime. I wanted to ask you something on community cohesion. Look, there's a real palpable sense of fear amongst minority communities. You saw the riots in Belfast, where people from ethnic minority backgrounds were having their houses targeted. You saw riots in Southampton. We've seen an increase in hate crimes against anti-Semitic hate crimes have gone up, Islamophobic hate crimes have gone up, hate crimes on public transport have gone up. I was wondering, what reassurance can you give, and I know you've been a great champion on community cohesion over a number of years now for our communities, what confidence can you give to ethnic minority communities and faith communities at the moment who are very scared at the moment, given what certain politicians have been doing in terms of whipping up the narrative and claiming there's two-tier policing?
But first of all, can I say there is not two-tier policing, and if you wanted to talk about two-tier policing, you might want to look at disproportionality in the use of police powers, level of arrests and so on. I don't think that gets us in a very good place. All the intelligence tells us that, we have no immediate threats in Bedfordshire. However, we know that some of what's happened over the last few months has happened spontaneously, sometimes without evidence. The riots that took place, the criminal riots that took place in Epsom, allegedly were to do with a crime that had never occurred. So we need to be always ensuring that misinformation is responded to with accuracy and formal information. And both the police and the 3 local authorities are very good at doing that, and that's really important. I've spent a lot of time, as you all know, Councillor, and others will know, visiting faith groups, faith organisations and communities. And sometimes we want faith harmony, but we also want community harmony, and they're not always simultaneous. We know there has been a rise in Islamophobia nationally, probably internationally, and some of that, there's evidence of some of that in Bedfordshire. But people could be fearful of something even if it's not an immediate threat to them, because they'll see something on television, as happened in Belfast, and think, we're not there. Or they see posts or statements by, the media, politicians. There may not even be politicians this side of the Atlantic. These things can influence and cause people. I think what we have to do is to continue to give reassurance. Police protection of places of worship, particularly mosques and gurudwaras, has been increased in line with national requirements from the Home Office, that I think we were there before the Home Office were on that. And I say gurudwaras because the Sikh community, after what happened in Southampton, now feels quite threatened, because, again, false information. I'm not going to make any comment on how the police officers did or did not behave when they made the arrest, because that's a matter for the IOPC and a matter for Hampshire, the Isle of Wight Constabulary, not a matter for me. However, we know those kind of things can act. So I think we have to continue to work. In Luton, the Luton Council convened the Community Cohesion Contingency Planning Group. I attended a meeting of that with the Superintendent of Police last week, and again, actions came from that to talk about how you give protection and give reassurance, what people should do if they feel fearful. Report, report, report. I think if you feel you are the victim of hate crime, report it. Hate crime has gone up, but the solve rate for hate crime has also gone up in Bedfordshire recently, which is also reassuring. And it's a priority for the force, and there's a command structure in there to address that. I can't give perhaps the reassurance that I'd like to give, because actually none of us can, but all of us have a responsibility to work at it, and we have to work with community leaders and voluntary organisations, councils and others to continue to spread the good and promote promote the good that occurs rather than exaggerating, you know, what may be seen as the bad. You may recall I reported to the panel previously that we moved to what is called Model 2 complaint handling. And forgive me, I'll let you explain what Model 2 is. Traditionally, initial and first line complaints have been handled by a team within the police service. Model 2 is that service transfers to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner or the Mayor, when there's a Mayor, which I think gives some independence, and we also have a team that can devote themselves to that task, and we've got a team working in my office, and I think doing a remarkable job. They're not being for long. And that's not a criticism of the work that went on in the police, but it's a different focus, and I think gives that sense. The increase in complaints, my understanding is it's a national picture. So Bedfordshire's not necessarily far out of kilter with what's happening at other police services. It could be too that sometimes the new approach may have a greater rigour as to what is a complaint and what's an inquiry. But I think for me, are the complainants feeling their complaints are being dealt with satisfactorily, and we're getting some feedback on that. This has only been in place for 4 or 5 months. So later in the year, we'll be able to give a much more detailed report on how it's going. But as a consequence, there are less referrals to PSD as well, which must be a good thing in terms of use of resource and for the officers and staff involved as well. And although the complaints team sits in my office, they work very closely with the police as well, because actually it's about getting the information and getting resolution. But I think we'll be in a position to give a more detailed report later in the year when that's been going for a bit longer.
Fiona?
Thanks for the report, John. A couple of things. I would welcome the panel having a workshop in the autumn on the reforms, because I think the implementation phase will suddenly come upon us and we won't have had decent planning time. So I would welcome us building that into any work programme going forward for the autumn. The 360-degree feedback, thank you again for that. But again, there's no data in there, like how many responses were there, what are the areas for development, because it presents a very positive story, which is commendable, but I would like to know where are the gaps, what did people say they thought could be improved as well. So that's just a brief point. The AI Advisory Board, I think that's a brilliant idea, so thank you for that. I'd be curious just to know who the people are, where they were recruited from, and whether or not, again, we could have some feedback from them going forwards about the nature of the work they're doing in this very fast-moving area. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for that. We can certainly give you more details on the 360. I haven't got them immediately to hand. And I think, a matter of a reform workshop's a matter for the panel, but we're more than happy to, contribute. And in terms of the AI Ethics Advisory Panel, I was very conscious that Bedfordshire is the leading force in terms of using AI. I think there are 42 applications currently. I got in trouble because I said 35 on Radio 4. I got a message from the Chief Constable very quickly. 42. So it's 42. I also have the national brief for ethics and governance of AI for the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. So I wanted also to lead by example. I think the advisory panel we have established, and we established it earlier this year, so it's still very much in its infancy. I think it's had 3 meetings, so 2 or 3 meetings, probably 2 formal meetings and a set-up meeting. We went out to external advert, but we've recruited, and again we can get, it's not a secret who the members are, they're all volunteers, and that can be published, I can't give you. So we have lawyers, we have experts in AI and technology, we have experts in ethics and in governance, and we also have representatives of the community. I mean, they are representatives of the community, but more akin to the membership of the stop and search and use of force security panels, and their role is to advise me on Bedfordshire Police's application and scrutinise some of that application. There has been, again, very strong collaboration and cooperation from the police, but clearly, the police will do their operational thing ultimately. And they have looked at 2 or 3 applications. For example, the application Encompass, which is using AI to notify schools when a child has been involved in a family that may have had DA and so on, and similar. But also in the use of live facial recognition technology. So, and I think they've done a very thorough job, and the police officers and police staff who've come to give evidence believe they've done a very thorough job as well. But we should, I think that their minutes and reports should be published on our website. And if they're not, that's an omission, but they will be.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioner. We've kind of touched on this, but this is kind of a follow-on from Councillor Mahmood's question. And it relates to the NOAC situation in Southampton. Following that tragic incident, did you have any conversations with the Chief Constable? Were there any lessons that Bedfordshire could learn? And have officers received any follow-on training since then?
I had certainly had conversations with the Chief Constable. I also had conversations with the IOPC and with the Inspectorate. Until we get the IOPC's report, I don't think we know what lessons it is we need to train against. Because I think there's a lot of speculation. There was also, my understanding is Hampshire and Isle of Wight police released a video, but it was a very small section of a much bigger video, for example. So I think we have to await the outcome of the IOPC. There will be, and the National Police Chiefs Council has said they will be revising some of their guidance in this area. And I think there may be some confusion about words in that. But I understand precisely what you're saying, but I prefer to get that evidence from the IOPC before we start making changes. But I think every Bedfordshire police officer knows they would treat, and I would expect, and the Chief would expect, they treat everybody fairly and without favour, irrespective of, if someone is committing a crime, it doesn't matter what their gender or ethnicity is, they'll be treated in the same way. I think some of this confusion is actually about when you do things like how you build relations with communities and do recruitment, rather than the immediate operational situation.
Just before we close this bit down, John, in the last month there was, of course, the tragic train crash in Bedford, in Kempston there. Impact on the force was and is?
Well, I mean, I think all of us were very, very troubled and alarmed when we heard about the crash at Elstow. And I think our thoughts are with the family of the deceased driver and with I think it's 9 people who are still in hospital, though I read today that I think they're all out of immediate critical, but I wouldn't want that. Bedfordshire Police and Bedfordshire Fire were the first on the scene. And I think there were something like 70 officers who were there. Officers redeployed, and that's certainly when abstraction was coming, and officers who voluntarily, and staff who had gone off shift, heard about it and came back in voluntarily to work. So the immediate scene, was dealt with by Bedfordshire Police and Bedfordshire Fire, supported by the East of England Ambulance Service. And they were, responsible for getting the injured and the non-injured off those two trains, but other trains that were backed up. So it was quite a big logistical operation. Then there was all the traffic management around, B8, whatever the road is. Lee will know what the road is that goes past Gepston Hardwick to Ampthill. But by the Saturday morning, British Transport Police had totally taken over, and Bedfordshire Police were able to withdraw. This is British Transport Police that have responsibility for investigating and carrying through, but clearly it's the local force that responds. I think, but what really was impressive, and everyone you talked to who said this, that it was a textbook response. All the planning that goes in between the police, fire, ambulance, the rail authorities, Bedford Borough Council, Central Bedfordshire Council would have been involved too, all just moved in as if it was some exercise. And for those officers, in fact, they will have been welfare support where necessary.
Thank you, John. We'll move on to number 7 on the agenda, strategic decisions. There's several on here. You may just want to, many of them relate to VEP. Could you just explain for anyone listening in what VEP is?
VEP is the Violence Exploitation Prevention Partnership. It was the Violence Exploitation Reduction Unit. It's a Home Office funded programme which sits in my office, but it's a partnership between the local authorities, the youth offending services, youth justice services rather, health service and the police.
And that is why there's a number of decisions there relating to grants and funding of their work, yes?
Yeah, their work consists of both direct provision, education programmes, but a lot of support to voluntary and community organisations.
One decision that stands out for me, well, there's two decisions actually. The decision 87 relates to the estate grant, and I've written here in my own handwriting, Greyfriars ? Has Greyfriars now been sold?
Subject to contract, Chair.
Thank you. I know I've been asking that question for 2 years now, but I thought we must be getting there shortly. And then decision.
I think maybe rather more than 2 years.
Yeah. And then the decision 99. This relates to your deputy. Totally, congratulations to her for taking her new role within the council, Luton Council. Was there any consideration for re-advertising the post? Now she's down to 10 hours a week, 10 hours and 5 minutes a week. Was there any consideration thinking, well, Umi's got a substantive role, she's got a substantive role in the NHS.
Umi's advice and support is very important to me, very valuable, and particularly in the area of protecting women and children, and she'll continue to do that role, slightly more advisory than hands-on. I would not want to, and I think that's a good use of public money. If we were to advertise, we'd probably have to, we're probably one of the few, I'm one of the few PCCs that only has a deputy that works over it. Many have full-time or half-time. So, at the moment I think it's working well, but clearly that's something we can continue to monitor.
Members, any other questions around the decisions? One of our Steve?
Just on that, and anyone that's met him will know that he's very hard-working and there's a simple mathematical equation between what she can do, what anyone could do with 10 hours as opposed to 14. So what discussions have been done about what's been taken off her plate with those 4 hours and where that is going, where those aims are going?
Well, she is continuing to be my principal advisor on protecting women and children, and that can be fulfilled in the 10 hours. The work that she was doing, some of that will fall to me, and some of it will fall to members of the staff.
We'll move on to key part of the meeting. It's item number 8, and it's your annual report. Members, massive presumption that we've all read it and in some detail. It's several pages long. Commissioner, is there anything you particularly want to bring to our attention within it?
I'm going to be a bit naughty and go back to my previous report, because I would want you to take note of the reports on the annual reports on the stock and search use of powers scrutiny panels, which I think are working exceedingly well and being very supportive, effectively, and the independent custody volunteer visitors as well. And they have both been, all those have been commended, I can say this much, by the inspectorate when they did their inspection. So I think those are positive. I wouldn't want it just to go by, but they're there to read, and they're an important part of the role of the office and holding, representing the public. As you maybe know, I don't intend to go through the whole of my annual report, you'll be pleased to know. I think the introduction is probably where I want to point initially, and I think the first year was very much a foundation year. I think we are now beginning to see things fall into place, particularly around partnership working and getting that cross-system approach. We've also had the improvements in performance for the police, which I referred to in our earlier conversation. So I'm more than happy to take questions rather than go through it. I know, Chair, you've got some questions.
I have, but have members got questions? Tatiana, anything you want to raise around the annual report? Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It was very lengthy. My observation was it talked a lot about what you were doing, but not so much detail on the outcome of the actions you were taking. Although one number did strike my attention, I'm sure you've had a conversation with the Chief Constable about your performance on immediate grade response at 49% achievement of 15 minutes. I found that quite alarming. What conversations have you had about that with the Chief Constable?
I think we referred to it earlier, actually, in a question from the Chair in terms of the performance and governance board reports. I have been, as has the Chief, to be fair, been looking to improve that performance rate. It's now 60%, not 49%, as the Chair said, and it's going in the right direction. It's still got a way to go, a lot better than it was at 49. And I was certainly asking Mr. Wells will be able to testify, some challenging questions when it was at 49%, because that was far too low. But I also come to match my point, I'm interested in the quality. In terms of the impact, I think there are impact elements in this report, but the ultimate impact is through police performance in the policing areas, and that's reported through the P&G board.
Thank you. Just as a follow-on, it's great that it's improved from 49 to 60. What are the challenges that are failing the force from meeting that target?
I mean, again, Mr. Wells is in a better position than I am, but let me have a go and he can come in. One is actually having sufficient officers and officers who are experienced and trained, and we still have a relatively young police force, not as young as it was. It's about having good supervisory leaders. It's about making the changes I referred to earlier in terms of the control room. So it's, it's from the call coming in to the car being dispatched is much quicker. And for example, there will be occasions when it's so clear there's an issue, a car will be dispatched immediately rather than going through a triage process. The introduction of AI into the control room is facilitating that in a positive way. The other is looking at areas like where are vehicles based and so on. So a lot of work is going on, but it is a challenge. It's not a challenge exclusive. This is no excuse at all. This is also a problem for many other forces. And it's not particularly an urban-rural split either, interestingly. Because I mean, that may be the assumption. And we're also able to call on, the vast majority of 999 calls will be from response control teams. There will be on occasion community and other officers who may be in the vicinity, but the police are also able to call on the collaborative units like firearms and road traffic who may be in a particular area as well. And there's more of that now than there was previously.
Right, yeah. I know I sometimes go through these reports like a sub-editor, and I just try to look at it as what I am now, a member of the public. Can I take you to page 7 in the financial report? So I'm looking at the top there, figures in bold, in blue, light blue, police grants and council tax, and I add them together and I get 167 million. Now, is that the budget? Because, I'll hold that, because at the second paragraph down from there, we talk about funding of 175 million. I just wonder what the difference is above the pie chart there. Funding of 175 million, yet the figure above is 167 million. If I turn the page over, we then have the outturn figures of 157 million. So I've got 3 different figures there that I'm looking at. Maybe it's me. Phil?
I will come back and then I'm going to hand over to Mr. Wells who will give you a more professional accounting answer. The figures on page 7, it should have been 26, 27. So it's actually the current year's budget, 175, not the 25, 26. So we will correct that before for that. And the grant is actually about net grants and growth grants. And I'll let Mr. Wells explain that. Okay. And the 150, the outturn for 25, 26 is correct. That was the year we're reporting the report. Right. Okay. But Mr. Wells could probably add.
Yeah, so you'll be aware, Chair, that the way that our grants are given to us is quite confusing. You get a core grant and you get ring-fence grants. The first table in where it says police grants of 101.3 million, that is the total level of grants we receive, whether they're core grant or ring-fence grants. And that's the 25-26 figure. The 175 million refers to 26-27, and then the table of the outturn is how that 25-26 grant turns into a net revenue budget of which the outturn is classified against. I think, though, on reading it, what we've most probably done is blurred 25-26 and 26-27 together, and what we most probably do is just rewrite that a little bit, Chair, so it's easier to read for the member of the public.
Thanks for that. I want to go to page 13. And this isn't, I'm not trying to be too pedantic, antisocial behaviour, second paragraph, John, the PCC holds Bedfordshire to account. So antisocial behaviour, the PCC holds Bedfordshire, I'm thinking that's Bedfordshire Police to account.
It would be very presumptuous of me, wouldn't it, to assume I could hold the whole of the county to account. You're correct. We'll correct that too.
Okay, thank you. And then, picking up again a point that Mr. Melvin made in some respects,
really key area, and we talked about Umi's work, and undoubtedly things have moved on in protecting women and children in the county. I'd like to have seen in there some stats. Been working on the plan now for two years. Let's say it's been live for 18 months, certainly for 15 months. I'd like to have seen some statistics in there to show what a difference having someone dedicated to the role had made.
We can certainly supply statistics. And again, the ones that would apply would be operational policing. Some of the other outcomes that certainly my deputy has achieved has been about how we've achieved partnership working, more collaborative working, new ways of working. But part of this is actually, I think what you're looking for is some stats from the...
Yeah, I'd like to think that it is an annual report, and I'd like to see this is the difference. This is the difference we've made working with the partnership. There's no doubt that work's ongoing. I see that, as I say, when I look at the partnership and governance meetings and the performance and governance meetings and the meetings with the chief constable. So great if you could, if something can be incorporated there, just to show, to give reassurance, I guess, to people that this is one of the missions. This is this is part of the plan, and this is how the plan is going. Let's say 15 months in. Can I move on to 23? This is just a critique, not a criticism, to hopefully. You talk of restorative justice, and the way it's written, I'm aware of what restorative justice is, but I'm not sure there's a full enough explanation within that page to explain what it actually is, and why would people... in the first paragraph it talks about almost doubling the previous year's total. Well, yeah, because of, and why? And because when I look at page 25, when you talk about complaints, there's a really clear definition of what the complaints resolution team do. I don't see that in restorative justice. I don't know if someone could, maybe being pedantic. I'm looking at members here, they may have not had a chance to read it in that depth. Maybe I've had too much time in the sun today. Who knows? But I'd just like to sort of see something clearer about what it was.
Happy to add a few words explaining what restorative justice is. It's a very important programme. I wish we could do more of it. Now, the government may be restricting how much we can apply it under their new rules. And it often gives victims an outcome which doesn't require going to court or having charges, which can be very beneficial. Sometimes it will be post, because they do some work working with prisoners as well. But we can say more on that if you wish.
I'll just shout again. I think one of the things...
Well, thank you for your comments on cohesion. I think we've talked about that already. In terms of victims, I mean, my office supports a range of organisations that support victims. Some of that we're using our money, and some we use Ministry of Justice money, which comes to us and then we allocate out to victims' organisations, often women's organisations working in the domestic violence and sexual crime space, but more generally. I see my role as championing victims across the system, and not just across the police. So the review which has been undertaken and is about to conclude has involved working with a whole range of stakeholders to look at how we can improve the victim's experience from the moment a crime occurs, which is not the same as when a crime is reported, because many crimes occur and there are victims and they don't report crimes. But how do we give them support? Right the way through the police process, through the charging process, through the court system and beyond, and looking to see how we can improve that within existing resources and existing legislation, because some of this, there are legal boundaries what can be achieved. But I'm confident that when we have the report completed and we've got an advisory group of experts in the area and people with lived experience, when we've got that report in, hopefully in the early autumn, I think you'll see some good initiatives. But that doesn't mean we're not taking initiatives currently. Things like the victim personal statements is very much part of that process.
John, a massive presumption here, I'm sure you've told us otherwise, but this is your annual report, you've got a policing plan, the plan stays the same moving forward?
Well, any plan that stays precisely the same is probably not a very good plan, but the broad principles and objectives and missions in the plan remain the same. There will be some changes because circumstances change in terms of emphasis and priority.
Members, any other comments on the plan? No. The Commissioner, on page 10, he makes reference to our work here on this, and it says that we review, report and make recommendations to the PC on his annual report. I'm going to suggest that a form of words, something like that, we note the contents and progress made against your plan within your report. We recommend that the few points raised this evening are incorporated in the final published version. Are members happy with that? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that, Chair. Thank you for that panel.
There's clear evidence of partnership working, and I totally appreciate the efforts that your team, because it is a wide team, go into. Right, that ends the need for you to stay. You can go home and watch the big one. Is it the Maldives versus Monrovia or someone there tonight? Yeah. We've still got some panel business to look at. Members, we move on to item number 9 that got published late this afternoon. It talked about the finances of running this unit. For the purposes of the public, the total grant that Bedford Borough get for servicing the police and crime panel comes to the princely sum of £66,180. Last year, we as a panel accrued an expenditure of £66,211. Everybody happy with that position? And moving forward in the next 2 years, things will remain the same? Yeah, okay, noted. Then we move on to annual panel activity report. This is for members of the 3 authorities to share with their respective authorities. I'm not going to comment further on it. That you're here to, however it's shared, it's shared. It's above my pay grade now. But we're happy with that contents of that at 10. And finally, the work programme. Well, can we respond to Leslie about the dates for the away days? I think the away days stretched out into September now. We do need to, I mean, I think probably everyone here would attend it. Preaching to converted. But go on, Leslie.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to add to that, because as part of the debate on the Commissioner's report, you talked about the workshop for police reform in the autumn. Maybe the panel might want to consider combining that on the away day, so that because I know time is precious for everybody, so we could combine that together, if that's helpful.
Chair, just an observation and a note. I'm sure you've clocked it yourself, but obviously people are on holidays, people are sick, but the attendance of this committee is very patchy. We've been in this situation before, and perhaps members need to be reminded of their obligations to attend.
I wholeheartedly agree, Lee. There's people here, not here this evening, that have missed many meetings. And on that one, I think it's 20 to 8. We'll close the meeting. Thanks indeed for your attendance.